When I think about the Halloween season, one of the first things that comes to mind is how much I look forward to watching It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown every year. To me, it's as important of a Halloween staple as decorations, pumpkin carving, and any scary movie. And in its story of spooky nights, celebrations, and unwavering faith, the Peanuts gang makes these long, dark nights just a little more comforting. Written by Charles Schulz, adapting several strips from his then increasingly popular Peanuts comic, and directed by Bill Melendez, It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown debuted on CBS on October 27, 1966, following Charlie Brown and the Peanuts gang on Halloween night, and, unlike the Charlie-centric A Charlie Brown Christmas, splits its focus between several different storylines. There's Charlie's sad sack trick-or-treating, Snoopy's imaginary night out as the World War I flying ace, and, most importantly, Linus's doomed faith in the Great Pumpkin coming to his pumpkin patch.
What's that? What's that? I hear the Great Pumpkin!
As the third ever Peanuts special and second holiday-themed one, Great Pumpkin was made at the insistence of CBS executives asking for Schulz, Melendez, and producer Lee Mendelson to make them a blockbuster they could air every year. The story they made was very simple and much more a series of vignettes than a real narrative. And while this Halloween night doesn't have the same emotional through line of Schultz's Christmas story, there's still the classic Peanuts themes of unexpected kindness and connection. More than half a century later, Great Pumpkin is still a charming staple of the season for me, and speaks to not only what I love about Peanuts, but something I love about the season that rarely gets talked about. The TV Halloween special, taking over shows once a year and bringing a little holiday fun during a time where scares seem to be around every corner. At the center of Charles Schulz's Peanuts, in both comic strip and TV form, is the dichotomy of small tragedies and little victories. These stories are inherently small scale, tracking Chuck and friends as they navigate their way through school days, holidays, and little anxieties that seem world-ending when you're a kid. It's also contrasted by the poignant, mature struggles and philosophical musings of little kids turned into adult ciphers in a world where anyone older than them makes little sense. Small tragedies like Charlie Brown's lifelong losing streak at baseball, and little victories like the little red-haired girl finally paying attention to Charles Schulz's comic strip cipher, are balanced by kindness extended in unlikely circumstances. Old Blockhead is the most put upon of the group, but everyone struggles. Even Snoopy, who seems to skate on by through sheer charisma. Here on Halloween night, everyone seems to stumble just a little. One of my favorite things about Great Pumpkin is the wonderful atmosphere created by director Bill Melendez. That spooky, ghost-filled opening is easily the most atmospheric part of the special, sending our trick-or-treaters running from all the scares they can imagine. But everything that follows looks incredible for the small budget they were working with here. These old Peanuts specials can't compete with the Disney animated features of the time, but the charm comes from the heart that shines through their simplicity. I love those big watercolor night skies that background the trick-or-treating and Linus's night in the pumpkin patch. It's just a little spooky in a soft, loving way. The kind of Halloween night you'd always want as a kid, no matter where you grew up. But even more important for the mood is Vince Guaraldi's low-key jazz score, this time recorded in a sextet alongside bassist Monty Budwig, drummer Colin Bailey, trumpeter Emmanuel Klein, guitarist John Gray, and flautist Ronnie Lang. Guaraldi immediately left his mark on the legacy of Peanuts when Mendelson hired the musician for a Charlie Brown documentary and A Charlie Brown Christmas, after hearing his breakthrough hit, Cast Your Fate to the Wind. And while Guaraldi would reuse his signature track of Linus and Lucy here, the centerpiece of the Great Pumpkin Waltz is a much more low-key affair, contrasting Guaraldi's quiet piano with Lang's fluttery, spooky flute. It feels like the imagined ghosts of Halloween's past whispering in your ear. Great Pumpkin relies more heavily on Guaraldi's score than probably any other Peanuts special, with its opening segment and Snoopy's flying ace escapades being almost entirely wordless. They really let Guaraldi's music shine, and it was his insistence on reusing Linus and Lucy, here spotlighted in the opening, that turned the piece into the unofficial Peanuts theme. What that score and wide nighttime sky emphasize are a loneliness on a late Halloween night. It's almost the same exact feeling that John Carpenter and Dean Cundey were creating with their own Halloween years later, just with a much warmer, more comforting twist. And that loneliness is used to contrast Linus's steadfast beliefs that the Great Pumpkin will come and reward him for his faith. The Great Pumpkin was first mentioned in the Peanuts comic strips on October 26, 1959, and is initially the byproduct of young Linus confusing Santa with the Halloween season. But even as Linus grew into the most intelligent member of Peanuts, his steadfast belief in the Great Pumpkin held firm, contrasting his logic and reasoning with a satirical faith, even turning him into a Great Pumpkin evangelist, going door to door to spread the good news. You can interpret Linus's Great Pumpkin faith in a lot of different ways, and people have over the decades, but it's difficult to pin any specific interpretation to it. Peanuts is steeped in Americana, both as one of the classic staples of American comics and as an ongoing story that lightly comments on the many different changes that happened in the country during the strip's 50-year run. So much of Peanuts was Charles Schulz being vulnerable about his own insecurities and anxieties, but done in a soft, gentle way that let millions of readers find something relatable on a daily basis. And each of its many different characters show a different side of America, as well as a different side of Schulz himself, with Charlie Brown, Linus, and Snoopy being the three most distinct sides of the creator. Charlie is the nervous, insecure kid that Schulz saw himself as in his younger days. Snoopy is the ever-confident star and sometime writer, growing in popularity and slowly taking over all things Peanuts as the strip and its merchandise grew famous. And Schulz himself described Linus as representing his religious side. While the author was raised Lutheran and taught Sunday school at a United Methodist church as a young adult, he moved further away from strict denominational faith as he grew older. Schulz once said, "I do not go to church anymore. I guess you might say I've come around to secular humanism, an obligation I believe all humans have to others, and the world we live in." In 2013, Schulz's widow, Jean Schulz, said, "When he came back from the army, he was very lonely. His mother had died, and he was invited to church by a pastor who had prepared his mother's service from the Church of God. He was always looking for what those passages really might have meant. God was very important to him, but in a very deep way, in a very mysterious way." With Linus fainting at the sight of Snoopy rising from the pumpkin patch, so sure that his faith has finally been rewarded, and Sally furious at having wasted her Halloween night,
You owe me restitution!
Linus's Great Pumpkin faith is ultimately the butt of the joke. Still, Schulz's story is never mean to him. In the end, Great Pumpkin gives Lucy one of her rare, truly sweet moments, bringing Linus in from the cold. But Schulz makes one last little joke from Linus's faith, with the character still staunchly believing that the Great Pumpkin will show up next year as the credits roll. It seems like this could happen every Halloween. And because the special was a blockbuster just like CBS wanted, with a 49% share of the audience on its premiere, it now has. Really, no one wins by the end of the special. Linus didn't get to see the Great Pumpkin, Sally missed out on tricks and treats, and Charlie ended up with a bag of rocks. But that's what Peanuts is in the end. Charlie Brown never did get to kick that football. But that's why everyone can relate to Chuck at some point in their life. And Great Pumpkin proves that more than any other Peanuts special. According to Schulz, Charlie not getting a single piece of candy on account of his shoddy ghost costume sparked an outpouring of love from viewers. And countless boxes of candy were sent in just for Charlie Brown. In the end, that's the lesson of Peanuts. Look out for the people around you, because you've probably been where they are now, and someday you'll probably be back there again.
A person should always choose a costume which is in direct contrast to her own personality.
Great Pumpkin is one of the first TV staples of the Halloween season, but it wouldn't be the last. To me, one of the fun parts of Halloween is seeing your favorite show reflect the season. Sometimes those shows will have characters celebrate the holidays as a break from their normal life and mark the season. I'm a big fan of how Community would so often incorporate a Halloween episode that reflected where its characters were at in their lives and relationships. The same goes for how The Office and Friends would let its characters dress up and celebrate, so we see ourselves reflected in their lives. After all, part of the appeal of sitcoms is that we get to imagine ourselves as part of a group of friends or family that we can relate to. So why shouldn't they be part of the same holidays that we are? Other shows would take a break from the reality of their world for a scary story where all bets were off. In any case, especially in the time of network TV, indulging in the Halloween season in every aspect of your life was always fun. The magic of the holidays is that they're shared with the people around you. There's a sense of connection to not just your family and friends, but to strangers that isn't possible at any other time because we're all living in a shared experience that only happens a few times a year. And being scared can be a communal experience too. If we're all scared by the same thing, whether it's a monster or a person or a disaster, then we know we're not alone in our fears, and that makes them a little more bearable. The Halloween season gives us permission to wear that fear on the outside just a little bit more. To me, a huge fan of both horror and the Halloween season in general, it's always so much fun to see the neighbors put up decorations or to walk into a store and see fun little skeletons and pumpkins lining the aisles. The cozy weather sets in, the nights get longer, and you want something warm to drink. Of course, that's also why it's the perfect time for horror. The dead leaves on the ground and the creeping dark let your imagination run wild. And like any holiday, Halloween connects you to your youth, a time to indulge in being scared, dressing up, and worrying a little less about the stresses of everyday life. In the end, that's why we celebrate any season, and I hope in a time where it's so easy to feel alone, you feel a little more connected to the people around you, even if it's just in the few moments we take to feel scared, laugh, and celebrate. Whatever we feel, if we feel it together, we feel a little less alone. Happy Halloween! Thanks for watching today's video and happy Halloween! For real this time. This is the final video of this year's Halloween season, and I'm so glad that I've been able to make all these videos this year. As I was making these videos, I was considering a lot of different topics as the Halloween finale, but in the end, I wanted to do something fun and light and sweet to end the season on. We've had a lot of different horror topics this season, and in general, I'm focusing on horror a lot more on the channel throughout the year, but there's only so often when you can actually talk about Great Pumpkin. And if you've been following the channel for a little while, you already know that I love Charlie Brown and Peanuts. I've previously done videos on A Charlie Brown Christmas, the Peanuts movie, Vince Guaraldi, and the similarities between Charlie Brown and Daredevil. So if you enjoyed this video and you haven't seen those, check them out. To me, Great Pumpkin really is a must-watch during every Halloween season, and something that I watch actually several times during October. It's an absolute comfort watch, and I never get sick of it. So whether you've seen Great Pumpkin a dozen times or never have before, I hope that you enjoyed this video on it and reflections on Halloween, Halloween TV specials, and what makes the Halloween season so great. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on your own favorite Halloween TV episodes, and Peanuts in general. Thanks for watching along this entire Halloween season, and I've absolutely loved bringing it to life once again. It's a time of year that I'm so excited for, both in my personal life and as a video creator. And I hope that you've really enjoyed it. As always, a huge thank you to my patrons for their continued support. And if you'd like to be a patron, it's only $1 a month for early access to every video and exclusive Patreon reviews. I've been doing Patreon-only reviews every week during October, and topics include Salem's Lot, Hellraiser, Tremors, Event Horizon, and Halloween Ends. So if you become a patron, you can access those and probably 100 other reviews that came before. So until the next video, I hope that you're enjoying the Halloween season, watching some great scary movies, and just taking the time to really have some fun. Happy Halloween!